right, we're going to talk today. Section 3.5 is kind of still working on the same thing that we were doing with 3.4. Now we're going to talk about some imaginary stuff. We're going to talk about some irrational answers, that sort of a thing. We're also going to work backwards. All right, there's a part of 3.5 that we are not going to do. We'll do that after the break. We'll just pick it up where we left off. We'll finish up 3 when we get back. There's one more thing I want to do. But when we talk about factoring completely, guys, we factor completely. Tell me what the answers are. So we have a couple different ways to do that. We can solve it by GCF. If it's a trinomial, break it down. If it's 4 terms, we group it. If nothing works, then we use our P over Q, right? But you don't automatically have to jump to P over Q. Always check to see if something factors. We're going to talk about the different kinds of answers that you could get here in these problems. If I look at this question, I have 4 terms. What do we do when we have 4 terms? We try and what? Let's try and group it. If I take the first 2 and then I take the second 2, what does the first 2 terms have in common? Okay, if I take out that x squared, I'm left with x minus 3, correct? What can I take out of the second second parenthesis? A positive 1, and I'm left with x minus 3. So I now have a new GCF. What is it? It's the new GCF. What does each term have in common? X minus 3. So we bring it out front. We write it 1 time. And then what do we do with the x squared and the 1? It gets its own parenthesis. All right, and now we figure out, can we factor this anymore? Can you factor x squared plus 1 anymore? No. If it was minus 1, could you? Yes. But you can't with plus 1. And you'll see why in just a second here. When I go to solve this, I get x minus 3 equals 0. And then I get x squared plus 1, equals 0. So on the left-hand side, I add 3 to both sides, right? And I get x equals what? 3. Over here, I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So I get x squared equals negative 1. Take what? Take the square root. And I get x equals plus or minus. Good, very good. I. You can put 1 I. How many answers total do I have? 3. How many did you tell me at the very beginning I was going to have? 3. Okay, good. What do you notice about these answers? 2 are imaginary. 2 are imaginary. And 1 is what? Real. All right, so on your quiz, you're going to be asked some questions, or one question might say find all of the zeros. So all of them would be x equals 3 and plus or minus I. This would be all the zeros. If they said find the real zeros, what would your answer be?
3.
X equals 3. If they said what are the imaginaries, you would say plus or minus I. All right, so just understand the different kinds of x's that you're getting. We're going to talk about a bunch of different kinds over these next few problems. You need to understand what they mean. Questions? Okay, let's move on. We go to this one. It says factoring. Factoring, all right? I know P over Q. I could always jump to P over Q. If I did do P over Q, what do I have to have when I write out my synthetic division? Okay, factors of 8, good. When I write out my coefficients, what do I need to make sure that I have? Zeros for what? For x cubed and for x to the first, right? Okay. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is say, is there a GCF? No. And then I say, okay, well, it's a trinomial. It's 3 terms. Does this factor? Well, let's think about it. What times what would give me x to the 4th? X squared and x squared? Okay. Are there factors of negative 8 that multiply to give you negative 8 but add to give you 2? What kind of 4? What kind of 2? Positive 4 and negative 2. You guys agree? Yeah. All right, can you factor this anymore? X squared plus 4? No. If it was minus, you could, but you can't. So go ahead. Let's just go ahead and solve. So x squared plus 4 equals 0. It'd be plus minus 2. And then x squared minus 2 equals 0. So when we solve, we're going to move forward to the other side. So I have x squared equals negative 4. And now what? Take the square root. So I get x equals plus minus 2i. What do you know about those two answers? These are imaginary, okay? Very good. These are imaginary. So now I come over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So x squared equals 2. Take the square root, and x equals plus minus. Anybody know the square root of 2? So plus minus square root of 2. All right, is positive, negative, square root of 2. Is that a place that I could put a point on a graph? Yes. This is a real number. Now we're going to talk about rationals versus irrational. When I say a rational number, I'm going to use this term, pretty. It's either a whole number or a terminating decimal. What do I mean by that? 1/2. Is that a terminating decimal? Yes. 0.5, right? It stops. 2/3. Is that a terminating decimal? No. I mean, terminating. I don't even know what that word means. Terminating. No, right? It's 0.3. It keeps repeating. So a real number is not imaginary. But if I talk about rational, it's something that's pretty. If we talk about irrational, those are not pretty. Pi is an irrational number. It's a decimal that goes on forever and ever and ever, right? So if I asked you the square root of 2, is that a pretty rational number, or is that a gross decimal? It's irrational. It's irrational. So when we talk about reals and imaginaries, all right, those are 2 categories, and then we can break down reals into 2 categories. Rational, which are quote-unquote pretty, and irrational, which are not. So just make sure you guys understand what those words mean. Where's my other examples? Okay, why don't I have them? All right, let me write them over here. All right, we have 3 examples. I don't know where mine went. So the first one is what? G of x. G of x. Equals x squared plus 10x plus 1. Okay. What's number 2? H of x equals x cubed plus 11x plus 39x plus 29. Yep. And then what's 3? Those are the only 2 we have. Oh, my bad. Okay. All right, let's talk about these. All right, let's see if we can factor this. First of all, GCF. No? All right, this is a trinomial, so can I break it down? Are there factors of 23 that multiply to give me 23 but add to give me 10? No. So you have 2 options here. You could do P over Q, see if anything works, but if it doesn't factor, will P over Q work? No. What could I use then, since I have x squared plus 10x plus 23? I could use the quadratic formula. If your highest exponent is a 2, you can use the quadratic formula. So I have x equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's fill in that info. I have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 23 all over 2a. Okay. So if we keep simplifying, we have negative 10 plus minus, what's the square, what's 10 squared? 100 minus, what's 23 times 4? 92. Okay. Divide by 2. Let's keep simplifying. So negative 10 plus minus What's 100 minus 92? 8 divided by 2. Okay. Can we break down a little more? Negative 10 plus minus. What can I break 8 into? 4 times 2, right? So that becomes 2 root 2 over 2. And then can we simplify a little more? Yes. Negative 10 divided by 2 would be negative 5 plus or minus what? Square root of 2. So my 2x's are right here. I knew I was going to have 2 from the very beginning. Are these two solutions real? Yes. Now we're going to characterize them a little more. Are they rational? Are they pretty? Do you know exactly where to put that point on a dot, or are they irrational? Irrational, okay? So on your quiz, tomorrow we're going to talk about this a little more, some more wrap-up stuff we're going to do. But you are going to be asked for, it might say find all the real zeros. That means the imaginary and the real ones. If it says find all the rational ones, that means only the ones that are pretty. Right? You need to know the difference. Let's look at the next one. 4 terms. So what should we try and do first? We should try and group. Does this group? Nope, sure doesn't. So that means if grouping doesn't work, I can't use the quadratic formula because the highest exponent is not a 2. So what have we learned that we can use to see if this factors at all? P over Q. All right, you might look at 29 and be like, oh, 29, why is 29 not that bad of a number? Because it's prime. There's only 2 factors of 29, 1 and 29. So let's do our synthetic division. Start with 1. Go ahead and stop as soon as you see something doesn't work. Yes, ma'am.
How did you get 1 from
You take, sorry, you weren't here the other day. You take the factors of the last number. And it's always plus minus. All right, so let's do our synthetic division. Bring down your 1. What's 1 times 1? 1. 1 plus 11 is 12. 12 times 1 is 12. 39 and 12. It's going to not work, right? Do we need to keep going? No? Go ahead and try negative 1. So 1, 11, 39, 29. Bring down the 1. 1 times negative 1. Negative 1. 11 minus 1 is 10. 10 times negative 1 is negative 10. What's 39 minus 10? Ooh, what's 29 times negative 1? What happens here? Perfect. What did you just figure out? X equals negative 1. That is a solution. What kind of a solution is that? It's rational and it's real. Good. It's a nice, pretty number. I know exactly where that is on a graph. So with what's left over, how would I write my resulting polynomial? X squared plus 10x, not squared, plus 29 equals 0. Does this factor? Everything else did. In 3.4, everything we did factor nice and pretty. How come this one doesn't? God bless you. If it doesn't factor, pretty. But my highest exponent is a 2. What's that little formula we can use? The quadratic. So negative 10 plus minus 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 29 all over what? 2 times 1? Okay. So negative 10 plus minus, what's 10 squared? 100. Minus, what's 4 times 29? 116 divided by 2. What do you guys notice now? It's what? It's imaginary. How do I know that? Because underneath the square root is going to be negative. So I have negative 10 plus minus. 100 minus 116 is negative 16 over 2. We can break this down a little more. Negative 10 plus minus. What's the square root of negative 16? 4i. Good. And can we break down just a tad more? Yeah? What's negative 10 divided by 2? Negative 5. And then what's 4 divided by 2? So plus minus 2i. How many solutions are there?
3.
There's 3 total. What are the ones in pink? These are imaginary. What's the one in white? It's real. Notice the difference. If a question says, what are the real solutions? Find the real zeros, you would tell me it's x equals negative 1. If it says find all of the solutions, it would be all 3 of these. Questions? All right, let's go back here. And then we will be done with 3.5. We'll practice more stuff tomorrow. This is a super duper easy concept. All right, up to this point, you guys have been given the whole polynomial and you've been finding the roots. So all we're doing here is working backwards. I want to know what the polynomial is that gave me these answers. So the way that we do that is we work backwards. All right, your directions on your quiz are going to say write the polynomial in function notation. That means at the beginning of your answer, you should have f of x equals h of x, g of x, whatever. How do I work backwards? All right, well, I know I have two solutions because I have two x's. Yeah? How would I take x equals 4 and work backwards and write it into a parenthesis?
Minus 4.
Yep, x minus 4. What would I do with negative 3? X plus 3, good. So now we FOIL. X squared plus 3x minus 4x minus 12. And then what do I do? Combine like terms. So your final answer would be f of x equals x squared minus x minus 12. You are going to be given the answers, given the roots, given the solutions. You have to find what polynomial that they come from. Just working backwards. All right, let's look at the next one. A little different. How many answers do I have? 2. Okay, so I have 2 parentheses. If I bring this over, this becomes x plus 2/3, right? Yeah. And if I bring this over, it becomes x minus 1. Agreed? Now, have you seen any polynomials that are like 2/3 x squared minus 7 over 5x plus 4? And I ask you to FOIL it or factor it. No. How can I rewrite x plus 2/3? What would that parenthesis look like? 3x plus 2. Good. Bring that coefficient over. We're undoing everything that we've done. So x minus 1. Now what do? FOIL. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x minus 1 minus 3x plus 2x minus 2. What do I do in the middle? Combine like, So I have, use g of x this time. 3x squared minus x minus 2. You will always come out, your exponent should match how many zeros you had. Since we had 2 zeros, the highest exponent was a 2. All right, look at the last one. This one's a little bit longer. What should my highest exponent be in my polynomial? Good. So I have 3 parentheses. This first parenthesis is x minus 5 over 2. This is x plus 1. And this is x plus 2/3, right? So now go another step. I don't like all these fractions. 2x minus 5, x plus 1, and 3x plus 2. Remember, your denominator becomes the coefficient. Now, guys, when we have something like this, do we FOIL everything all at one time? No. It doesn't matter what order you FOIL in. I like to keep the first parenthesis out here in the front, just hanging out. FOIL the next 2 together, and then we'll combine like terms and FOIL it back with the other one. Hang on. All right, so x times 3x is 3x squared. X times 2 is plus 2x. 1 times 3x is plus 3x. 1 times 2 is 2. So I still have my 2x minus 5. Very important that you guys take your time on this. I still have 2x minus 5. Yeah, sure. So this becomes 3x squared plus what? Plus 5x plus 2. And now we FOIL. We multiply again. 2x and 3x squared gives me 6x to the 3rd. 2x and 5x gives me plus 10x squared. 2x and 2 gives me plus 4x. Agreed? Okay. So So now we'll take negative 5. So negative 5 and 3x squared is negative 15x squared. Negative 5 and 5x gives me minus 25x. And negative 5 and 2 gives me plus 10. Everybody with me? All right, with the first, is it, oh yeah, my bad, thank you. Thank you, minus 10. All right, so what should my answer start off with? Before that. F of x, g of x, h of x, something, function notation. So I'm going to say f of x. I have no idea why I wrote it in cursive. Highest exponent I see is cubed. Is there anything else that has a cubed with it? No. Nope, so just get rid of your 6x cubed. Now combine like terms. Positive 10x squared and a negative 15x squared. Minus 5x squared. Positive 4x, negative 25. Minus 21x, and then minus 10. And that, folks, is your polynomial. If you were given this polynomial and you were asked to factor it, these are the answers that you would get. So your quiz is only going to be 5 or 6 questions. It's probably going to be 2 of these and then 4 of factoring and telling about the kinds of solutions that you're getting and all that. Some using P over Q, some using this and that. So just make sure you guys understand what the question is asking and how to answer it. Yeah?